Welcome to everyone. We're continuing the discussion and a reading from Prabhupada's books that began about 3 weeks ago. And we've researched what Prabhupada has said about leaving our bodies, and we've been discussing it. And we're continuing to read, and now we're reading from Prabhupada's lectures or reading from Krishna book and other sources. And we're going to begin by chanting Jai Radha Madhava, and that allows the devotees to get online and be online when we're ready to begin. So I don't know if you can chant along, but you can try. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jishodha Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Jishodha Nandana Rajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodha Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Here's my keys and my cup, my instrument. So, welcome everyone. We had 2 classes, Wednesday and Thursday, where we had classes on different topics, and now we are going back to this topic. And before we begin, I want to remind you of something that Mother Gauri said. And you may remember the story that we told in I believe the last class or the class before, that the people in hospice or the doctor came and said, "You have 1 hour to live." And she said, "Take a picture of me." And she had a big smile. And I'm going to read what she said. Well, I was going to read what she said. I had it, but this is what she said. By full dedication to one's duty and service, and by tolerating the concomitant dualities of the world, one could, as promised, indeed conquer death. So we had talked a little bit about this, but I was thinking about it, and it underscores so much of what we've been talking about. And basically, if we unpack it and rephrase what she's saying, if you're dedicated now, if you're dedicated to whatever your duties are, if you're dedicated to your service, and I would add dedicated to your sadhana, if you're dedicated, if you're dutiful, and then she says, and if you tolerate all the dualities of the world that come, that you have to face when you're trying to do your duties, when you're trying to be steady, if you can tolerate them, then, as promised, this is interesting, because we've been reading how Prabhupada says if you try to be Krishna conscious now, if you try to practice remembering Krishna, then naturally, because of that practice, you're going to be able to do it at the time of death. And so she's saying, if we're steady in our bhakti and we're tolerant, then as promised, in other words, what's the promise? As Krishna promised, as Prabhupada promised, then we will be able to indeed conquer death. So what she's saying is, this is her experience, that she's dying. This is an hour before she's dying. And I would rephrase it in a way that she's saying, you can do this also. It's not as hard as you think. It's not going to be the fearful event or the torturous event or this extremely frightening event that you may imagine it to be. But if you've already been dutiful and steady and tolerant of the ups and downs, then at this point, you're well practiced. As Prabhupada said, you're well practiced in your Krishna consciousness. So you already know how to tolerate, you know how to be dutiful. So now you'll be dutiful in leaving your body. And all help will come to you, as we've been reading. Krishna will help us. It's not going to be difficult. So she's giving reassurance. So I don't know if you picked up on that when we were discussing this last time, but I was just thinking about it last night and this morning. And I was thinking, we need to discuss this a little more, because she's underscoring everything that we've been saying, that yeah, you'll be able to do this, that Krishna consciousness is preparing you for this moment if you take Krishna consciousness properly. And especially here, I think a real key word here is tolerant. What does she say? Tolerating the concomitant dualities of the world. In other words, be dutiful and tolerate all the difficulties on the path of being dutiful. If you can do that, then you're going to be able to conquer death. What does she mean? Conquer death. She means you're going to be able to deal with this. It's not going to be difficult. Then another thought is that death is a natural part of life. And so if you practice for it, then you'll get good at it. Just as you get good at anything. Excuse me. A little more light. Yeah. So, yes. The other theme, there's a few themes that have been going throughout all our discussions and practically everything we're reading. And that one of the main themes, which she's also underscoring, is practice. If you're doing it now, you're going to do it then. If you're not doing it now, then why would you do it then if you're not doing it now? Does that make sense? So if I'm practicing tolerance now, and tolerance in the sense she's referring to, and because she uses the word dualities. So what does she mean by dualities? Well, she means if you're tolerant, you're going to be steady. If you're not tolerant, You're going to be up and down. Right? So she's saying, if you practice tolerance now, if you learn how to be steady even when the world is pushing you up or kicking you down, this is called teaching with your hands. One of my godbrothers, he teaches with his hands. So I picked up on it. So you remember we were talking about this? Sometimes things are good and it kind of pushes you from the bottom to go up, and sometimes things are bad and it pushes you from the top. And so if you allow yourself to be pushed, then your life is pretty much like a yo-yo. So you know, how you doing, Prabhu? Oh, today's really great. What happened? Oh, I went to the donut shop in New York. I got some amazing donuts. I haven't been there in months. Great day. What happened today? Oh, nasty person in my office. She was on my case for no reason. I didn't do anything wrong. Now I'm down. Well, when you can't see my hand, it means really low. How you doing today? Oh, it's Friday, last day of work. Good, How you doing today? Oh, great program. Oh, how you doing today? I have a headache. And so, but when we talk about tolerance, one of the things that when Krishna is talking about tolerance, Titikshava, what's the context he's speaking about it? He's speaking about happiness and distress. They come, they go. I did a song for kids. Should I sing it for you? Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer and the winter snow. Something, don't be, how does anybody know that song I sang? I don't even know my own song. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer and the winter snow. Don't be disturbed. You want me to find the words to that song? I know you do. Don't go anywhere. We're going to find it. And you're asking, where's that song? Well, I have a site called Mahatma's Music, no apostrophe, Mahatma's Music, and I put my music there. And this is called Songs for Krishna's Kids. And I'm looking for that song. Hold on. I may have put that song on that site, actually. I don't even find it here. Oh my God. That's a crime. Okay, hold on. I think I'm going to get it, if we're lucky. Here it is. This is Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 14. She we're talking about is Gauri. We had read about Gauri's leaving her body previously. So this is Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 14. I'll read the Sanskrit because you probably know it. Matra sparshas tu kanteya sitoshno sukadukada agama paino nityas tam titikshasva bharata. So we have this word titiksha, which means tolerance. So we're talking about tolerance. And we're talking about how tolerance is, when Krishna speaks about tolerance, he's speaking it in the context of duality. And matra sparshas tu kanteya. So maybe what I will do now, because I forgot, I just want to read you the Prabhupada's translation, then I'll read you my translation. Okay, this is Prabhupada's translation. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance. The distress, the non-permanent appearance of happiness, it comes, it doesn't stay, and distress and their disappearance. They come, happiness comes, and it disappears. Where did it go? I was having such a good time. And distress comes, and after a while, it goes. The non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O sign of Bharata. One must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, Prabhupada, Mahatma's music, Krishna, and it's called Songs for Krishna's Kids, and this is on it. But I want to sing it for you. God, you probably want me to get my guitar and sing it, but I'm not sure if I have the chords. Okay, hold on. We want to raise the entertainment value, and we're a little spontaneous, right? Should I get my guitar? Okay, we're going to try this, if I can remember the chords, all right? And then you can sing along. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I have to go get my guitar. Okay, we're back. Now, you get to watch me figure out the song, if I remember. Happiness and pain come and go, just like. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, these are the words. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter's snow. Some things feel good, and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. This was for kids, but adults like it also. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter's snow. Some things feel good, some things feel bad. No, it's not. Some things. I'll figure out the chords again. Got it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. You got it? You want to put the words up, Kamania? Happiness and pain come and go. That's the first line. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. Happiness and pain come and go. Or you can all write it down somewhere on your phone. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. So this was for kids, but we could turn it into rock and roll. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. So remember, this is in the context of Krishna teaching tolerance. When he's teaching tolerance, tolerance means steady, right? Happiness, distress, be steady. And you can apply any duality. So tolerance means I'm learning, just like the summer melts and winter snow. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming. Okay, we're ready. 2, 3, 4. 2. I don't even know. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. That was the kids' version. Now I think we have to do the adult version. You can give me a beat. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. Some things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. Now we'll do the special New Age version of it. The ethereal version. Happiness and pain come and go, just like the summer melts the winter snow. So things feel good and some feel bad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. Tolerate them without becoming sad. One more time. Tolerate them without becoming sad. Wow. Okay. Don't forget that song. Hare Krishna. All right. So just to emphasize this point again, just to put the icing on the cake, that she uses the word tolerating duality. So she's saying, if we can be tolerant, and I was just saying, well, tolerance means being steady in the face of duality. So if we can be tolerant, that means not moving up and down when things are good or bad. Then when you come to death, you're well practiced. So when you come to death, you're well practiced. So it's something you're used to. But if we don't learn tolerance, then we have a problem, because when we face death, we're not practiced and we're going to get very distressed. I think there's some similar verses. Yeah, we had discussed. I'll read the next verse. It just takes this point on. This is verse 2:15. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. So Krishna's underscoring that if you're steady in happiness and distress, you're in the perfect position to be liberated or leave this world in Krishna consciousness. So I think that point is clear, but it's a point Krishna makes, and we had read before last verse of 7th chapter that if you practice Krishna consciousness, you can remember me at the time of death. It's all about not being affected by duality. And in this chapter, Krishna talks a lot about duality. So if we go back or forward, let me see. Yeah, I think if you go forward in this chapter, which is what I'm doing, I think we come to some verses later in the chapter. Yeah, I have to go ahead. If I can find it, would be nice. Now Krishna's describing how we're not the body, many, many verses. And then Krishna says, well, this is interesting. It said, for one who's taken birth, you have to die. Remember we said the number one cause of death is birth. Yeah, that's the number one disease, birth. So because you have to die, don't lament, just do your duty. And, Krishna, Arjuna is unsteady. Krishna's trying to get him steady. I'm trying to look at those verses. Just give me a moment. And he's saying, if you don't fight, you'll be sinful, you'll be embarrassed, eternal infamy. So these are material considerations. If you die in the battle, you go to heaven. Then here, this is verse 38, chapter 2 of Gita. Now Krishna starts talking about duality. So I think this is nice to hear because it'll make it more clear what we're talking about. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting. It's interesting, Prabhupada's using that old English. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, or victory or defeat. And so doing, you shall never incur sin. Isn't that? I never registered in my mind that Prabhupada was using that old English. Do thou fight. Thou means you. You should fight. So, don't consider happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. So this idea of tolerance. So what does tolerance mean? So Krishna is saying, don't consider happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. There's so many dualities. Be steady. Okay, let's see what he says next. Oh, he's going to go on to another topic. Yes. But I believe he comes back to this topic. Give me a moment. Later on. Anyway, you get the idea, right? It's pretty, I think we've made it clear. Correct? You want another song, right? Okay, here's another verse. There's more verses, I knew there were. There's, sound is too low. Hari Bol. So there's another verse. This is 248. Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. So this is a beautiful word, equiposed or equanimity. It means equal. And so here, the next duality Krishna is referring to is success and failure. So you could imagine if you practice your life not being affected by happiness and distress, heat and cold, loss or gain, success or failure, then when it's time to leave your body, then it's going to be easy. I think there's another verse. Hold on. Another verse in the kids' song. No. That relates to this. We have another one about tolerance. It's from the Bhagavatam. The sadhu is tolerant to Tikshava Kuranika. It's a quality. And I was once speaking with Borijan Prabhu, and in his realization he said that the essence of humility is tolerance, because Krishna, or Mahaprabhu says, be tolerant. So he said the essence of humility is tolerance. I thought that was interesting. Be more tolerant than the tree. That's included in the third verse of Shishastakam. So when I reflected on what he said, then I started remembering a story. I was in a very, very wealthy section of Florida once, and I was in line waiting to get a juice. And there was a man next to me who was very impatient. And he had a salad in his hand, and he wanted to get the juice, and he wanted to pay for it. And the guy in the juice stand was having a problem with his equipment, and this man was becoming very impatient. And he got so angry, he just threw his salad down and said, "I'm leaving." And I was thinking, yeah, this man's probably an important person, and probably people just do what he says. And he couldn't tolerate being neglected for a few minutes, things moving slowly. That was just the impression I got. And I travel a lot, and sometimes I'm just in line with certain people, and I can just tell these people are like movers and shakers. They're in charge of companies, because you can see just the way they line up and how they do things on the plane. They're not used to things not going well for them. They're used to people just taking care of them. And so if you become proud, it becomes difficult to tolerate. So tolerance is a concomitant factor of humility. And that's an interesting way of looking at it, isn't it? Proud people tend not to be humble, not to be tolerant. So, and poor people tend to be more tolerant. You probably have experience of that in India. The village people come to Mayapur, they're very tolerant people. They line up maybe for an hour to get prasadam. They line up to go into the temple. And we as Westerners, if we have to line up for 10, 15 minutes to go in the temple, we might beat up somebody. We'll go up to the guards. "What are you doing? This line's too long. What's wrong with you? I'm going to tell the authorities." That's our Western mentality. And the Indians, the village people, they just, okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you know what I'm saying. So Ekta says, being equiposed in dualities like happiness and distress, or success and failure, when we are still practicing sadhana bhakti and aren't pure, is difficult. Reacting seems to be a natural response. What can we do or implement daily, regular basis to help cultivate tolerating more? Well, what you said is true, but there's a missing point here, because this is the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So in this chapter, Arjuna he's like us. He's having difficulty tolerating. And what Krishna is telling him is that you do this as a duty. So it's nothing more than, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do as a duty, because in order to be dutiful, I have to be tolerant. So it's kind of like, you're up against the wall. If you're not tolerant, you can't do your duty. If you're not tolerant, you're going to have trouble in Krishna consciousness. And Ekta is saying, yeah, but how do I become tolerant? And Mahatma is saying, by being tolerant. But how do I be tolerant? And Mahatma is saying, by being tolerant. But how do you do that? And Mahatma is saying, you just do it. So sometimes the only answer is do it. Or I could throw it back to you and say, you're going to need to figure out how to do it. So, okay, I'll give you a little insight. But you have to tell me what you have difficulty tolerating. Maybe you have difficulty tolerating your children or your husband or your boss or the weather or whatever. So you're going to have to change how you look at things a little bit if you're not tolerating them. Because maybe there's things about the situation, if you saw in a different way, you would be more tolerant, more understanding, more empathetic. So that's one strategy. But the other strategy, which basically is what Krishna is telling Arjuna, he's not telling him how to do it. He's just telling him to do it. He's saying you're not the body. All right, but that's theoretical knowledge. Okay, you understand you're not the body. But he's saying, if you're not tolerant, you're going to be affected by duality. And if you're affected by duality, you're not going to be able to do your duty. And let me see. There's this one verse I'm looking for which would put the icing on the cake. And it ends with eligible for liberation. If you do this, you're eligible for liberation. Who knows that verse? It's like such an obvious verse, and don't know why I'm not thinking of it. I can search that also, but I know devotees, they don't like my answer when I say just do it, but sometimes that's really the answer. Like, just tolerate it. How do you tolerate it? You just do it. Sometimes that's the answer. Of course, you could say, well, if you're Krishna conscious, you become more tolerant. So that's also the other answer, which a lot of devotees don't think is a good answer. It's not the answer I wanted. Prabhu, how do you do this? Just become more Krishna conscious. How do you become more of this? Be more Krishna conscious. Whatever your problem is, become more Krishna conscious. Of course, the next question is, how do I become more? So I'm going to throw this back at Ekta. This would be like a comedy routine. Ekta says, how do I become more tolerant? Mahatma says, by being more Krishna conscious. Well, how can I become more Krishna conscious? By being more tolerant. So, at some point, we're just going to have to be more tolerant. It's part of the job description of going back to Godhead. You have to be more tolerant. It's just what you have to do. How do I do it? It's going to be different for all of you, but in some cases, it's just realizing I have to be more tolerant. This is what I have to do. So because I have to do it, I have to figure out how I'm going to do it. That's the idea. Sometimes it's like that. Well, how do I do it? Figure it out. But understand this is what you have to do to become Krishna conscious. This is what you have to do to go back to Godhead. So understanding that's an impetus, right? So understanding that I have to be tolerant, then the next point is, okay, how am I going to do this? I better figure this out because this is important. Okay, and I want to find this verse well, here's a verse. It's not the one I was looking at, but it's getting us there. And this is text 56, because I made the point the other day that chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about being steady in duality, which is what we're talking about, and ultimately being steady in the greatest duality, or the greatest distress when we're leaving our body. One who is not disturbed in mind even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called the sage of steady mind. So, Stita Dhyarmoni. So now Krishna is talking about steadiness. Like you, Arjuna, you're not steady. You need to be steady, because if you're not steady, you're not going to have spiritual life. You're not going to make it. Next verse, 57. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Now, did you pick up on this? Krishna is saying knowledge means to not be affected by duality. That's interesting, because he's saying you're situated in knowledge. He's not saying you know, but he's saying you know how to act. So when you transcend duality, then you can say, now I know. And before we transcend duality, we can say, well, I heard about it. I have that information in my head, but I don't really know it. And so that's an interesting verse, isn't it? I read it again. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Fixed in perfect knowledge, there's action there. He's acting that way. So, okay, so what happens when you're fixed in perfect knowledge? Then, what's the next verse? Continues, one who's able to withdraw the senses from the sense objects like a tortoise withdraws his limbs within the shell, is fixed in perfect consciousness. Fixed in perfect consciousness. It means acting in transcendental consciousness. So, I'm going on. Then Krishna's, 2 verses down, Krishna is saying, even if you're a learned person, you understand this, the senses are so strong they can drive you crazy, basically, as we know. And then Krishna says, this is 61. So it's similar. It's just another way of Krishna saying the same thing. It doesn't seem like he's exactly saying the same thing, because now he's focusing on the senses, but he is. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. So we had Stitidir Muni before, fixed in consciousness, and this is Pragya Pratishtita, steady intelligence. So, senses, pull us up, down, left, right, sideways, backwards, forwards. So the same duality is there, steady intelligence. So steady. Krishna, we're getting this theme, aren't we? Steady, fixed in perfect knowledge, fixed in consciousness, fixed in intelligence, steady intelligence. We're getting all this fixed, right? I think it's interesting to read these verses in the context, isn't it, that we've been discussing. Maybe you didn't realize this was actually what Krishna was talking about. Now, Krishna goes on to saying the famous verses, when you meditate on objects of senses, then you give in to them. And so that's another duality. So he said, you when that happens, you go down because you couldn't tolerate it. So we go to 64. A person free from attachment and aversion, another duality, attachment, I want it, aversion, I don't want it. So I'm speaking with my hands, right? Attachment, give it to me, aversion. Person free from attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles regulative principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. Attachment and aversion, again a duality. If you have the complete mercy of the Lord, then certainly leaving your body is not a problem. Next verse, 65. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. Again, your intelligence, it's established. You're satisfied, you're established. Getting the picture, huh? Then the next verse, Krishna says, if you're not in Krishna consciousness, you can't have steady intelligence or a steady mind. Steady, this is the big topic of the second chapter of the Gita. As the strong wind sweeps away a boat on water, even one of the roaming senses which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. Again, he's not steady, his intelligence goes. So if you restrain, next verse, if you restrain your senses, you're a man of steady intelligence. Okay, we're going to go past a few more verses. Person's not disturbed by desires, who enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever filled, but is always still, can achieve peace. So what does peace mean? Steady. Yes? Person who's given up all desires for sense gratification, free from desires. Peace. What does peace mean? Steady. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. The culmination. Wake up, everyone. Listen to this. This is what I was looking for. I knew this was there. This is a different verse than I was looking for, but this is a better verse. This is 272. Kamini, I think you should bring this verse up because I'll read the Sanskrit while you're bringing it up. Bhagavad Gita 272. This is the culmination of what we're discussing. This was like celebration. Drum roll, please. Esha brahmi stita partha nainam prapya vimuyati Titvasham Shtitvasyamante kalepi Brahmanirvanam Richati. This is an amazing verse. This Krishna, thank you for this verse. This was the icing on the cake of my last 10 minutes of speaking. And this makes the point, exactly the point I wanted to make. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life. So this is, after all these verses we've been reading, that is the way. What I've been telling you, this freedom from duality, this tolerance, that is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered, and death is very bewildering. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter in the kingdom of God. There it is, right there. So this is so interesting because, you know, when we began this discussion, we began on March 22nd. And one of the main themes that came up was how much our Shastras are preparing us for dying. And most books you read do not prepare you for dying, they prepare you for living. That was a big theme in the beginning, right? So now Krishna is making all these points, and he's like, what's the point of everything? Well, the point is that when you die, you can die in Krishna consciousness, because that's the goal. So this is like, it just underscores everything. I want to read that again. And Brahmanirvanam Richati, you can attain the spiritual kingdom. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. Wow, that was icing on the cake. But give me one moment, because there's other one that's eligible for liberation is another verse. So I wanted to read that for you. This is 2:15. Did we miss this verse? Maybe we did and I wasn't paying attention. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. We must have read that. But this again underscores the point that Krishna is saying, okay, if you're not disturbed by happiness and distress, if you learn this art of tolerance in duality, somehow or other, Tanya, somehow or other, how am I going to be tolerant? You're going to do it because this is the necessary ingredient for becoming eligible for liberation. If you can do this, if you can stop being a yo-yo, yo-yo Devi, or yo-yo Dasa, if you can stop being a yo-yo, then what happens as you start to slow down? Then you become eligible to be Krishna conscious. Now you're steady. The world's pounding on you, it's pushing you up to enjoy, it's pounding you down, and you're steady. But if you're not, if you're a yo-yo, then when the time of death comes, you'll just get pounded down. That's the point. So the practice of Krishna consciousness is the practice of tolerance and being steady. That's what it's all about. So, Tanya, meditate on that, and I think that's going to help you become tolerant, because when you're in a situation that's difficult to tolerate, then you're going to think, okay, this is what it's all about. I have to learn to do this. This is the practice. This is one of the major practices of Krishna consciousness, is to be more tolerant than a tree. Well, you know, that's pretty tolerant. We can be tolerant a little bit more than we are today, and a little bit more tomorrow and the next day. That's the practice. So, you know, if you're not such a tolerant person, it may be your, you know, your physiological nature or whatever, but wherever your starting point is, going to have to try to do better and tolerate more. And then you'll be eligible for liberation. And then, like Mother Gauri was saying, when you die, you can do this. It's not going to be that hard because you've been doing it all your life. That's the point. Now, I've been repeating things a lot, as you've noticed. But I think it's important, and I have some Shastra for it. Last night, we were reading the Brihat Bhagavatamrita by Sanatana Goswami. And in the beginning of the Brihat Bhagavatamrita, it explains that a lot of things are being repeated over and over again. It said, but that's typical of Sanskrit literature. It's a methodology that they'll repeat it in different stories, the same idea. And then we had talked about this before, that repeating is necessary to remember, of course, but to better understand, because we don't always understand it the first time. So if we can hear it again and again and again, that helps us get a deeper understanding, and it gives us more chance to put it in the context of our life. So it's just interesting as these different verses come up and we put them in the context of leaving our bodies, how they all just kind of fit in amazingly, where, maybe when you were studying or reading verses about tolerance, you weren't always putting it within the context, oh, I have to do this, because when I die, if I don't do this, I won't be able to properly think of Krishna. Maybe you weren't putting it in that context before. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't, but now it's very clear, that context. And then Krishna is saying here, eligible for liberation. You will be eligible. Samadukam sukam dhiram somritadvaya kalpan. If you're sama in dukkha, sama means equal, samadukam, sukha, happiness, dhiram, sober, somritadvaya kalpate. Then, for liberation, kalpate. You've got, Krishna is saying, basically, you have the qualification now to leave your body in Krishna consciousness, because you've practiced. So Tanya, I think that's the best answer, is understand the position of tolerance within Krishna consciousness, what it produces, the necessity of it, how tolerance is something that we have to practice in order to become free from duality. It's something that comes as a byproduct of being Krishna conscious, but it's something that's absolutely necessary. So, Hare Krishna. I think that answered the question. So, you have some questions and comments, and no, that was Ekta, not Tanya. Tanya has another. I kept saying Tanya, but, well, Tanya has the same thing. I may have answered your question, Tanya. I'm going to read it. What does tolerance mean practically? I'm asking because I've seen people who go through difficult situations experiencing all the emotional turmoil of sadness, regret, but eventually use that This is going to be an interesting question. I've seen people who go through difficult situations experiencing all the emotional turmoil of sadness, regret, etc., but eventually use that situation for spiritual growth. And I've seen people who act tolerantly on the surface, but they are just numbing their emotions and becoming emotional wrecks. Wow, what a question. Oh my God. What you said is 100% true. Sometimes when you hit the bottom and you suffer enough, then the pain, as Rumi said, something like, what did he say? The light comes through the pain, the light comes through the wound. Yeah. So, as we all know, sometimes we have to hit bottom before we realize we were on a downward spiral, a downward roll to turn around. So that's good. But if you can turn around without suffering, it's better. If you could tolerate it in the first place, that would be better. That would save time and it would save suffering. But if you can't, and the result is you needed the suffering to wake you up, and you took advantage of it, that's good. What you described in the second situation is very interesting. I'm glad you brought it up. It's tolerance when it's only external, and inside you're going crazy. You're not dealing with something. You're not expressing it, you're not talking about it, etc. And then you explode. So in our conditioned state, yes, there are things that are going to be more difficult to tolerate than others, especially the people we're living with sometimes. And we need to confront it, we need to deal with it. And sometimes tolerance may mean adjusting things, so, or adjusting relationships, or talking about things, so I'm not put on edge in a way that causes me to explode, like you're saying. So obviously, in our state, there's things we won't be able to tolerate well. There's things we will be able to tolerate if we put our attention on it. And the things we won't tolerate well, if we're living in that environment, constantly being barraged by this stuff we can't tolerate, and we're just holding it and holding it in, one day you're going to scream at your mother-in-law because she's been making you cook every day and clean the kitchen for the last 10 years, and you know, you have a PhD and you wanted to go out and become a whatever, and she kept you home and you tolerated. Yeah. So we've talked in other classes about, well, there's some things maybe you shouldn't tolerate, they're not healthy to tolerate. So this also brings up that topic. Maybe I'm tolerating something that's not healthy, or I'm suppressing a certain side of me by tolerating another situation. Okay, I won't do this. I will tolerate, but maybe I should do that. Maybe I need to express myself that way. So this is a whole other topic. I'm glad you brought it up, and we could do a whole workshop on this. And we've talked about this a little bit before. So I guess we could also put a caveat to this discussion is be careful how much you tolerate and be careful what you tolerate, because you may be trying to tolerate too much, and maybe you just have to change the situation a little bit so there's not too much to tolerate, or you have to discuss the situation with another person so they don't drive you crazy, because we all have limits of tolerance until we're very advanced. So you don't want to be in a situation that drives you totally crazy, that destroys your health because you're so stressed out. And then in your stress, you drive everyone else crazy. So we're conditioned souls. So yes, that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing it up. We have to deal rationally with what we're able to tolerate. But I think we understand the principle here. It's necessary to gradually increase our tolerance. And there may be, according to our levels, our individual nature and our levels of Krishna consciousness, there may be things that we're just not yet able to tolerate. Like, I have to eat this, or I have to do that, and I just, if I don't, I'll kill somebody. Yeah, so we're human, so that happens. But the process of Krishna consciousness is that we become more tolerant gradually. That's the idea. And we practice, you could say, maybe I can't tolerate this well, but I can work around it in a way so I'm not, for lack of a better word, getting messed up by the situation. So that would be a kind of a intelligent tolerance. You've learned how to deal with it. Well, how do I tolerate this? Well, if I just do this, then I won't have to do that, and so I can tolerate it. Or like we have sensual desires. So one way you fulfill sensual desires is in grihastha life. So I'm single, I can't tolerate it, so I move into grihastha life. It's just a little broader. There's less to tolerate. So it's a broader sense of toleration. It moves the toleration zone a little bit further. So something like that. It's a strategy. Okay, I couldn't tolerate it, but I did this, now I can tolerate it. So, so sometimes we see that someone's working in a certain department or a certain temple. It's better they move out of that. That's just, they can't tolerate it. they can't tolerate the present situation. So as well, they can't tolerate it as well as they should. So they have to make some adjustment. So some more tolerance may be possible if the situations change. So that's practical, that's real, because we are conditioned souls. So we want to traverse this path intelligently. At the same time, understand the principles that Krishna's teaching and endeavor as best we can to be tolerant. Okay. I think Krishna Karshini, Goshai, call her Goshai. Goshai is, I think it's male, a male Goswami. Goshai. Is it not artificial tolerance without developing internal humility may end up exploding with anger? Yeah, exact question. This is a topic for another class, but I think we have discussed this in the past. And that so nothing it's you're dealing with we talked yesterday about balance. Okay. So we just talked about one aspect of balance. We've been focusing on balance in Grihastha life. But here's another aspect of balance. Now look at you want to be humble, but there's things you can't tolerate. So there's this polar opposites going on. And so our lives are like that all the time, right? I want to be humble, you want to be humble, and we all like to be appreciated. I want to be humble and you want to be humble. And there's things we just can't tolerate, but how do we deal with that? There's some point in the middle where we have to create this balance point so it's healthy. Because I can't be that tolerant, or I can't be extremely humble. It's just not in me, and I can't be without appreciation. I want a little appreciation. So is there a point where it becomes real for me and it doesn't destroy me and it becomes healthy and I can accept it? That's part of balancing these two things as conditioned souls. So so you're all going to have to try to understand, well, what's that level of tolerance that is artificial that would have a backlash? And then how to deal with that. And so that's a good point, and it's for you to contemplate and just allow yourself to look at both sides of the duality and try to find what the Buddhists say, the middle road, where, let's use this example. I want to become humble, but I like to be appreciated. Or we say, I like to be healthy, but I like to eat bad food. There's just two opposites going on. You could think in your life, I like to live simple, but I like to have lots of nice things. There's all this going on. So where's the middle point where you can satisfy that need in a way that it's not going to be detrimental to you on an emotional or spiritual level? That's what we have to do. So where am I at in tolerance now? Can I get further without it having a backlash, being destructive? That's the idea. So anything good could end up being bad. So too much tolerance could be bad. You could tolerate, like we've talked about, you could tolerate people who are destroying you. And as you two are saying, you tolerate something and it's just building up aggression in you, and at one point it comes out, so it's very unhealthy. It's like a little cancer building up inside of you. So you'll need some way to express it. And sometimes, especially for women, you can just express it. Maybe talking about it could be very helpful. Or talking to a friend about a situation, or even talking to the person who's causing you to become intolerant and talking about it. So that's, there are things we can do to help ourselves, so it won't just burn inside of us, but it can come out and be processed in a healthy way. And this is such an interesting topic because tolerance is such an important thing. But then we're seeing how tolerance could become unhealthy. Humility is such an important thing, but we've seen with people whose self-esteem is low, if you push too much about humility, finding your faults, respecting others. They already think they're low, but not in a healthy way, in an unhealthy way. So to push them, no, everybody's better than you, and you are the worst. Well, they already think that way in a perverted sense, not in a Krishna conscious sense. So if you say it more, it damages them emotionally. And it's such a paradox because it's an essential philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And now you're speaking an essential philosophy and it's causing psychological problems for people. Isn't that strange? But we have to be aware of that because it's true. So the point is don't tolerate more than you can tolerate, because if you try to do that, then you're going to blow up. So that level you can't tolerate, you need to process it in a way that it doesn't become toxic and create dysfunction. So yeah, that's such an interesting topic, isn't it? And this is something that I never thought about as a young devotee, how doing things in Krishna consciousness could be toxic. Although we did see it with artificial renunciation, people who tried to be renounced and had a backlash. But we never equated it to all these other things, like being stressing humility could be unhealthy for someone. Stressing tolerance could be unhealthy. We never thought like that. We always thought the opposite. So these are very good points. Thank you for that question. Paran Ananda Piotri Bueno says, I have a question. On the one hand, Krishna says to tolerate happiness and unhappiness, and on the other hand, he inspires Arjuna not to tolerate the evil condemnations. Yes. So, of the Kauravas. So then the answer is, we have to know what to tolerate and we have to know what not to tolerate. And also you have to understand the context is Arjuna's a Kshatriya. So a Kshatriya cannot tolerate irreligion, adharma. His job is to be intolerant of adharma. If you're a policeman and someone is stealing, you can't say, well, we should be tolerant, and so we should let him go, don't arrest him. No. That's Brahminical. But as a Kshatriya, you have to arrest him. So that's also, you have to understand Arjuna is a Kshatriya. And so Krishna is saying, Arjuna, see, okay, this is a very good point. This is so cool. It's so interesting to put things in various contexts, because when you put it in a different context, the same philosophy looks different. And you go, oh, I never thought of it in that context. When you're reading Prabhupada's books, the more context you can see them from, the more they come out. So we know in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna told Krishna, I want to be a mendicant. And Krishna said, no, I want to be, let them have the kingdom. I'll just renounce. I'll live in the forest. No. What is actually going on here? Arjuna is being tolerant, and Krishna is saying, no, don't be tolerant. Isn't it? That's exactly what you're asking. Arjuna is saying, what's the use of killing them, on my behalf? And Yudhishthira also felt the same way. Why? Because of me, all these people are going to die. So, I'll live a renounced life. I'll live a mendicant's life. I'll live like a Brahmin. I'll live like a priest. Let me do that. Of course, Krishna said you can't do that because you're a Kshatriya. It's not your nature. But in the context I'm speaking, Krishna is telling Arjuna, no, right now, compassion is bad. Right now, forgiving is bad. Right now, tolerance is bad, because that is an impediment to your duty. So Prabhupada said Krishna spoke to Arjuna to get him angry, because right now as a Kshatriya, your duty is to be angry. And if you're not angry, then you're negligent of your duty. Isn't that interesting? Now you remember that Prabhupada said two things about Arjuna. His compassion was misdirected, and his compassion was not good. In another purport, Prabhupada said his compassion was good. He said he's soft-hearted. Arjuna is soft-hearted, devotee. Compassion is good. So why the duality? Yeah, for a devotee, compassion is good. For Kshatriya, who has to defend the world, innocent people, against people like Duryodhana and company, compassion is not good. Forgiveness is not good. Tolerance is not good. Get those guys. They're bad. Don't tolerate this stuff. Don't be lovey-dovey. Or, you could do a funny play. Arjuna is like, no, we should all feel the love for our brothers. And, why should we, we're spiritual. Why should we give in to our lower nature? But we should give love vibrations and light, And Krishna's like, shut up, Arjuna. This is all nonsense. You're speaking nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. That's what Krishna's telling Arjuna. You are a fool. You think you're going to be a Brahmin and that's going to be good? The whole world's going to hell right now. Get on your chariot and do your duty. And then he calls him an idiot, basically. You're idiot, fool, stupid. So that's what's going on there in that. Isn't that interesting? So this answers your question perfectly. This is like the perfect sequel to this discussion. Krishna is telling Arjuna, do not tolerate this stuff. You can't tolerate this. This is bad stuff. Bad stuff is going down and you're tolerating it? What is wrong with you? You're a Kshatriya. You're not supposed to tolerate this. This is bad. No. We should be tolerant. Yes, when you put on the hat of a devotee, you should be tolerant, you should be forgiving. That's Brahminical. Prabhupada said foremost quality of a devotee is compassion, is forgiveness, is tolerance. So when you're wearing that hat, yes. But in certain situations, tolerance then gets in the way of your duty. You shouldn't tolerate it. People are attacking our movement. We don't tolerate that. Right? Anything that's disturbing the spreading of Krishna consciousness, we should not tolerate that. At one time, the one devotee was asked by Prabhupada to do something, and the devotee was fighting with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada just got very angry. No, because Prabhupada wanted him to do something, so Prabhupada wasn't tolerating him. So sometimes in the line of duty, we should not tolerate. So that's another angle of it. The first angle was the emotional level, how it may be bad for us. The second angle is how it may be bad for other people if we're tolerant. So I find that this is like a beautiful way to put the whole scene of the first, second chapter in context. The qualities of a devotee are obvious: compassion, tolerance, and so forth. Qualities of a Kshatriya, or in duty, we may have to adapt and adjust. Hare Krishna. Yes. So I'm going down. We have read all these verses. Today was a Bhagavad Gita class, wasn't it? These questions are fantastical. Every once in a while you hear a deafening tapping. I don't know, it's part of I think it's part of the internet going crazy. So I thought I had better, I was trying to upgrade my internet. I bought something to upgrade it. I thought it would be better. Maybe it's so good it's making noises. So, Hare Krishna. So we're talking about repetition, and Kamini has said, my dull head needs repetition, so I'm grateful you keep trying to drive the points home. Yeah. It's necessary. We forget. I mean, we could probably read everything we already read and be like, oh, I forgot that, which is probably a good idea to review a lot. Yeah, tolerate by looking at the benefits of tolerating. Yeah, Kamini has said, this is Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters. So, yeah. So, yeah, sometimes that's the only way the light's going to enter. So Jesse says, Queen Kunti prays for suffering in the Bhagavatam as it increased her attraction for Krishna. Is suffering better than happiness in that regard because we tend to just want to keep enjoying? If that's the case, yeah, suffering would be better. Tend to just want to keep enjoying the happiness when it happens. Well, when the Pandavas were suffering, Krishna would come and save them. And so she said, the best part about suffering is that we get to see you, right? So that's why she said, well, let the suffering happen again and again, because that way we get your darshan. So, but maybe we get Krishna's darshan through suffering in a different way. We get some Krishna consciousness to come. So any way that Krishna consciousness can come, that's the best. That's the best for us. So if Krishna consciousness can come through suffering, then we welcome it. And if we lose our Krishna consciousness because there's too much happiness, then we don't want it, because we want Krishna. We're actually not concerned with happiness or distress, we're concerned with Krishna. But if distress brings Krishna, we'll take it. If happiness removes Krishna, we don't want it. Krishna, don't give me happiness if I'm going to forget you. Krishna, give me distress if that's the only way I'm going to remember you. Or give me distress if I remember you more. Your best days of japa were the days where you're suffering the most. Okay, bring it on. More suffering, Krishna. That's great. Better japa. Of course, most of us would not pray for suffering. But Kunti's example is we get your darshan when we suffer. So that is true, what you said. If anything that brings you closer to Krishna is welcome. Anything that takes you away from Krishna is not welcome. Even if what takes you away from Krishna is good in the material sense, what's the good about it? It's, by definition, anything that takes you away from Krishna is bad, and by definition, anything that brings you closer to Krishna is good, even if it's the opposite by definition materially. And then Shastra says, if you take this discussion further, then Shastra says, materially there is no good or bad. You say, why is that? We see, here's a good car, here's a bad car. Here's a good guy, here's a bad guy. He said, because everything is not used for Krishna, so it's all bad. Everything is for sense gratification. So in that higher sense is all bad. And so anything that can't bring you to Krishna is bad. And anything that can bring you to Krishna is good. And if death brings you closer to Krishna, bring it on. It's welcome. I often think that for a lot of us, death may be the thing we needed the most. Like we're kind of going on in our devotional service, la di da 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 da. Everything's okay. How's your rounds? Yeah, they're okay. Getting up early? Sometimes. You're reading every day? Sometimes. Yeah. But life is good. Got my pakoras and halava and la di da da da. We have our deities and we have our friends and so we're just kind of cruising. Not really going up back to Godhead, just kind of not going down and not going up, just kind of surfing the waves, little Maya, little Krishna. And then, boom, something happens and we go up. So if something has to happen for us to go up, then in our intelligence we would say, Krishna, let it happen. That's what I need. Now, you want some good advice? Here it is. Don't force Krishna to smash you to go up. Better just go up yourself so you don't have to undergo some kind of horror story in your life. If you do it, Krishna won't have to crumple you and destroy you so that you go up. You just go up yourself. And he's like, okay, I can leave you alone. Otherwise, I have to create some situation for you. But if you don't want Krishna to create that situation, probably he won't. If you're not that sincere, probably he won't. But if you're sincere, probably he will. At some point when he sees, oh, this Prabhu, this Mataji, she really needs help. She really wants to be Krishna conscious, but she's having a really hard time. She's really attached or really lazy or really this or that. So I'm going to come and shake him up or shake her up. He may do that. And if he does that, then that's good. Hallelujah, Prabhu, it's good. Why not? So Marco says, maybe we think we could be fearless taking the good association of Krishna at the time of death. Because Yamaraj is a pure devotee. Yeah, that's there also. That, Yamaraj sees you're a devotee. He's like, Jai Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Vansha Kalpadruvascha. That's there also. But as we discussed last week, Yamaraj is intelligent. So, if you're a fake devotee, he's going to see through you. He's going to say, Yamaraj is going to say, what's up with the Tulsi and Tilak and the big Krishna tattoos? You don't act like a devotee. You're trying to fake me, trying to make me think you're a devotee. And I'm going to come here and just leave you alone. Well, I'm not that stupid, So that's there also. It's the last hour of my life. Get out the Tilak, Prabhus. Put it on thick, Give me some more Tulsi beads, Big Tilak all over, When Yamaraj, new Dodi, when Yamaraj sees me, he's going to go, yeah, here's my man. So, not exactly like that. Right? Yamaraj may say, who are you trying to fool? You think I'm stupid or something? So, you read Shastra, it sounds like that's all you have to do. But, that's supposed to be a symptom of you being pure. Not like internally you're not pure and you just put on the makeup of a devotee and just think, okay, I hope Yamaraj thinks I'm a devotee. I hope Yamaraj doesn't know everything I did. He knows everything. Hare Krishna. You can't fool Yamaraj. You can't fool him. It would be foolish to try. So Kamini says, I so much appreciate your reply to Goshai regarding artificial tolerance and humility. It makes me contemplate how we need to be authentic. Yes. Being authentic in your Krishna consciousness is sometimes difficult, not because you don't know where you're at, just because you're afraid to admit where you're at, or you're afraid to act on the level you're at because you think, well, maybe that could be a disaster. But we have to know how to be able to act from where we're at in a way that we go up, not deny where we're at, because sometimes acknowledging where we're at becomes scary or depressing. No, but you have to know where you're at. It's like the example I give. I think I gave this in India. If you're going somewhere, the GPS calculates where you're at to start, right? You have to have a starting point. Or, you go online. Back in the day, they had MapQuest, I want to go here. Well, where are you? Where are you coming from? So it's like that. I want to go back to Godhead, Well, the first question is, if we want to take you back to Godhead, we have to know, where are you? Where are you at? Well, I'm up here. Well, actually, you're not up there. You're down here. So if you tell me you're up here, or you think you're up here, you're going to get the wrong direction because you're getting directions from here. There's some story, maybe someone knows, somebody was lost. I forget. I'll get it mixed up. But that's the point. You need to know where you're at so you know where to go. And sometimes it's hard for us to look at where we're at because it's kind of depressing. Like, oh my God, this is where I'm at. But the trick is to see where you're at, not be depressed, and then be able to act from there enthusiastically. We're going to, on tomorrow, you're just tomorrow, and I think the ad went out. but we'll put it again on Facebook. Tomorrow we're doing a class at 9:30, which means as soon as this class ends tomorrow, we're going to do a class. They're doing a retreat workshop, but it's all online in Buenos Aires. So it'll be translated into Spanish. But they want me to talk about this topic of, not giving up, going on. And so part of not being able to give up is just to be able to accept yourself with all your faults and not be depressed by it, but realize that it doesn't matter if I just continue in my bhakti, I'll get purified. But accepting where we're at is sometimes difficult, but it's necessary. And we had a whole workshop, a whole retreat in Mayapur, centered around of just being real, with questions to ask ourselves, to be more real about who we are and what we need. Gopal Anandadas says, I heard one time Prabhupada walked in the prasadam hall and there was a bad smell from the guests' dirty feet, and devotees sat there taking prasadam, similarly tolerating. Prabhupada said, you are tolerating because you're a Sudras, a person in the mode of goodness would not tolerate the dirty atmosphere. That's true. I never heard that story, but there are similar stories when things were dirty and devotees were tolerating, and Prabhupada said, yeah, you're in the mode of ignorance, you tolerate. So, very good point. I forgot to mention this. Thank you, Gopal Ananda. Because, sometimes I am very tolerant. My house is a total mess. My wife is so intolerant. She's always telling me I'm a mess. But I'm very tolerant. I can walk over dirty underwear. It doesn't bother me. I can see piles of dirt and cockroaches in the corner of the kitchen. It doesn't bother me because I'm tolerant. But it bothers my wife. She's so intolerant. So the point is, sometimes intolerance is a sign of sattva gun and tolerance is a sign of tamagun. So if you're tolerating dirt, if you're tolerating disorganization, that means you're tamasic. And if there's disorganization and dirt and you're not tolerating it, it means you're sattvic. So that's interesting. That adds a whole dimension to the mix of tolerance, which I totally forgot to mention. But, there was a story. They hadn't cleaned the toilet. And they said, and Prabhupada noticed it. And Prabhupada said, why didn't you notice that? They were walking by, it was an outhouse. They were walking in Mayapur and they saw this outhouse, but it hadn't been cleaned. And they said, okay, Prabhupada, we'll clean it later. And Prabhupada's saying, why is it that I noticed it, but you didn't notice it? And so Prabhupada made the same point. He said, if you're in the mode of ignorance, you won't notice it. And if you're in mode of goodness, you'll notice it. It's like, sometimes you hear some music and it's very tamasic. It sounds like a factory, basically. Maybe it's techno or something. I'm not on the scene anymore, but to me, I hear some music and it sounds like you're driving by a factory. You know what I'm talking about? And so obviously some people really like that. Otherwise, people wouldn't be making music that people don't like. And then we'll hear the music and we'll think, what's that? It's kind of disturbing. So depending on your mode, you'll be disturbed by something. So if something's very tamasic and you're not disturbed by it, it's not a good sign. But, however, sometimes you're in a situation which is very tamasic, and you have to be in that situation, so you have to be tolerant. Like when Prabhupada first went to America, they had meat in their refrigerator, and he had to put his food in there also. So he had no choice. But internally, it was difficult. But whenever they said, Swamiji, is this the problem? He said, don't bother, because he was a guest. He didn't want to disturb them. So sometimes you may recognize this is tamasic, but I have to tolerate it. But there's a side of me that is intolerant, which is good, because I'm not tolerating the tamasic. But there's a side of me that's, well, in this situation, I have no choice but to tolerate. So, yes. So Goshai, Krishna Karshani says, from what you're saying about tolerance, I understand that we have to find our tolerance zero point, in the sense we have to know our limits of tolerance and try to check ourselves. Because, of course, it's not always possible, but from people or situations to protect ourselves, which may trigger us to lose tolerance. In other words, protect yourself from exploding. Yes. Yeah. The 0 point, that middle road, but also what's your exploding point and how did you get to your exploding point? This is what they call in psychology passive aggressive. The person is very shanti, very Hare Krishna. And then, you hear stories about this person being violent and you think, that person's never be violent. They're so shanti. But they're shanti externally, but they're holding in a lot of aggression. And then eventually it comes out because it wasn't dealt with properly. Yeah. So that's correct. No tapping sound on Kamania's headphones. Okay, good sound. My trusted little Rode microphone, video mic, something. But I have a better mic, and it's at Krishna.com somewhere. They're going to try to find it. And then if I get the better mic, it's going to sound like we're doing a radio show. Better recordings are always good. Because seeing is not so important, but hearing, that's important. So oh my God, it's past 9:30 and you have so many questions. Just going down. Okay, 2 more questions, then we'll go. How at this moment, when a pair of demoniac people prepared a pseudo-pandemic conspiracy theory, to tolerate all the power, deceptive powers, how do we, whether it's true or not, but when you see leadership not being real leaders and people being exploited, how do we tolerate it? We don't tolerate it, but there's a healthy way not to tolerate it. And the healthy way is to take that intolerance and transform it into something positive, transform it into inspiration to preach. That's the idea. So I can't stand that people are being exploited. Scientists are cheating. They're misleading people. Leaders are misleading people. The doctors ignorantly misleading people. Whatever. It makes you angry. Transform that anger, which is energy, into inspiration to preach. Because anger is energy. So anger is not bad. Could kill somebody. No, I'm so angry I could go out and preach to somebody. That's it, right? I'm so angry I could start a new temple. I am so angry with what's going on in the world, I could start a college program. I am so angry with the meat eaters and the propaganda. I'm so mad I could start a Govinda's restaurant. That's how you take it. So you transform your anger into something positive. That's the idea. Right? Yes. You know that's right. Otherwise, it's just anger. It'll destroy you. So rather than anger destroy you, take the energy, turn it around, and then bring it to sattva. Use the anger to inspire you. I mean, Hanuman was quite inspired, to destroy Lanka. He was angry. So, as we said, Prabhupada had to preach. Prabhupada said Krishna had to preach to Arjuna to get him angry. So, anger is not bad if it's, if it's transformed. So that's it. Transformation of anger. Tanya says Arjuna had to be tolerant in that situation because he had to perform his duty and kill his beloved grandfather. Yes, he had to. And Arjuna had to tolerate his own emotions to not do that. And all the distress that was coming. Yeah, he had to. Definitely. He was, look what Arjuna had to tolerate to fight. Oh my God, he has to kill his relatives. Hare Krishna. And one last question. Final question, I hope. Okay, let this be the last question. I have so many things to do, and I'm giving another class at 1 o'clock to the devotees in Scotland. I will see. Okay, so just make a note of this. They want me to give a class at 1 o'clock about relationships. So I'm going to ask them if they can stream it to my Facebook. So that class will be on Facebook. And then tomorrow, right after class, 9:30, we're going to do another class with Spanish translation. And we're going to see, Radha Priya is going to see if that can be, if everything can be, go to my Facebook. It just means I don't see your questions unless you go on the stream for Zoom. But I can put you on, we can send you the stream if you want to go on it. So, last question. I noticed that if we are happy or not happy in Krishna consciousness, it's more related with our psychology than with Krishna. There are people, including devotees, who love to suffer, and when they come to Krishna consciousness, they keep suffering because they feel guilty being happy, but it's a totally different topic. Yeah, that's true. Sometimes we mix up psychology and philosophy, and so we're thinking a certain way because we think, well, that's the philosophy. But if everyone is not thinking that way, it must mean it's psychology, because if it's the actual philosophy, we would all think the same way, more or less. But if you're thinking a lot different way, like you're saying here, getting discouraged or feeling guilty or unhappy or whatever, it's your psychology. It's a philosophy going through your psychology, and then it's stimulating your psychology. And so sometimes the problem is we have some dysfunctional psychology, and we allow the philosophy to stimulate. Like we were saying, you have low self-esteem. You read about humility, then it increases your low self-esteem or your misery. You tend to be unhappy, and you read about how bad the material world is, and you become more unhappy. So that's true. Why don't you ask that question tomorrow, because that's a whole. I could go off on that for a while, and I want to end class here. So thank you all for attending. We had, I think, a very exciting class today with a song and Bhagavad Gita, and really great questions you're asking that opened up these topics to take new dimensions. So that was great. I enjoyed it. Share the video if you can. I think it'll be helpful for many devotees. A lot of these things I talk about, if I gave this class 15 years ago, 20, maybe more like 20, 30 years ago, I wouldn't say these things. I wouldn't have the realization. So I often think when I give class, oh, I just saved you like 30 years of practicing Krishna consciousness. It would have taken you 30 more years to figure this out. I mean, that sounds proud of me. But sometimes it's like that. And so, so if you want to share with others, say, hey, this video will save you 30 years of suffering. Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll see you later. If you want to come at 1 o'clock, I'll try to find the link. No, I won't try. I will get the link, and then we'll send it out if it's okay with that devotee, if he lets us. Actually, I don't have to send you the link. I'm sure it'll be okay with that devotee. Just look on Facebook at 1 o'clock, or you'll get a notification. Yeah. Can any of you write descriptions, or am I the only one who can write the description? Because I'm starting this, because I'm just lazy. Okay, Kamini, send me an email and tell me what I should write. Or no, send me a WhatsApp message. Tell me what I should write, or a Facebook message. WhatsApp is better. Send me a WhatsApp message if you have my WhatsApp info. But someone else can give it to you if you don't. And send me that, and then I can just copy it and put it up. Okay, thank you for watching. Hare Krishna. We will see you later, if not tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.